Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. We're talking week 2, almost now week 3 of Seahawks training camp. Welcome in, man. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. It's a fun time of year just to see the practices out there. They haven't really started hitting yet. That kind of starts today, but they're out there, they're working out. It's been a fun week. So
yeah, I'm having a hard time because not seeing anything and just seeing reports is a bit frustrating. I'm not in the Seattle area. I can't get up there and get to practices easy. And so relying on some other people to kind of have some input on what's going on is just a bit frustrating, just because, and add to that the fact they haven't had pads on yet. They're just glorifying working out, essentially running through some stuff, doing some drills, doing some 7-on-7 things, some red zone things, but it really doesn't mean anything. So what you're seeing out there is, sometimes everyone looks sharp. Sometimes somebody has a bad day. It gets kind of blown up a little bit. But I just find the whole process interesting. I'm like you. I love this time of year. It really kind of eases you into the season a little bit. Maybe it lasts too long, but to the players it goes by in a snap, but to us we just want to get to the games, and that seems like it's quite a ways off. But we are going to get to a preseason game on the 13th against the Steelers. That's coming up in a couple weeks. So welcome in. Tell me what your thoughts are on the DK Metcalf thing. That played out basically. Yeah, it played out kind of basically the way that we thought it would in the off season, and they were able to get it done. Yeah.
So it did continue a tradition for this show where you and I sit down, we break down something that we expect to see, and somewhere between recording and publishing, it happens. So the moment we hit publish, it's already outdated.
Yes.
It would happen with Chris Carson getting let go. And now it happened here. We spent some time talking about Metcalf and what we expected to see. And then 2 hours after we got done recording, he signed the deal. So yeah, I was
hustling to get the show out anyway. And I couldn't do it in time.
Yeah. I mean, it's it is a tradition for us to
seemingly. Yeah. We break the news before it actually happens without saying anything ahead of time. Yeah. We just break it by recording a show. And
if we record a show and talk about something like that, it typically happens between when we're done recording and when we actually get the show on the air. So, and
one of these days we do have the ability to do live shows. I will say that. And we technically do live shows anyway because we don't edit. So maybe we should just hit the live button once in a while and nail some of these things as they're happening. So break this thing down for me. It actually was slightly surprising. It was on the low end for me, both in years and in value. What did you think?
Well, I mean, it is exactly what I thought it to be. As far as the average salary was $24 million.
And I thought it would be closer to 26.
Yeah, I think 24 to 25 was about right. But we're still talking about a small percentage here. 3 years. True. The reason, so it's a lesser total money than I think you and I, because you and I were looking at $100 million over 4 years, and said it's 75 over 3.
72 over 3.
I know, but I'm rounding.
Sure.
And so it's the same idea, but it's just a shorter contract. And I think that might have been what the sticking point and why it took a couple extra days was because the Seahawks wanted him for that extra year, and he wanted to hit free agency when he was still 27.
Yes.
Because we got to remember, he came in super young. The 3 years that he's going to be on this new deal, he's going to be 25, 26, and 27. Now, there is another year when he's 28 to 2025 here. It looks like that year when it originally was reported that it might be a void year, but it's not. It's just structured in a way where he's probably not going to play on that deal, and they'll have to work out something before that year and get him a new contract. So
yeah, the cap hits are pretty easy. I mean, 8.8 million this year, 13.7 million next year. And then it jumps 24.4 in 2024 and 29.5 in 2025. And you're right. That looks like a restructure type of year or an extension of some sort. Or he may elect to just move on depending on how the team does in the next few years with the quarterback situation, et cetera. And you're right. At hitting a free agency contract at age 27, it'll be his 28, turn 28 in season that year. That's prime time. That's prime time for him. So we'll see what happens. This probably looks like a tremendous bargain in 3 years' time.
Oh, absolutely, it does. And then the other part of that for him, though, is like this is a payday. He's like, what is he? The third highest paid receiver in the NFL.
He got a $31 million signing bonus. Yeah. On the day he signed the contract, he received all of that money.
Yep.
So that was the largest payout ever for a wide receiver. And
the total guarantees of the deal was $58.2 million.
Which is substantial out of 72. I mean, that's almost fully guaranteed, essentially.
Yeah, it's just a lot of guaranteed money there for him. And this isn't his sign a contract during the prime of his career moment. That's the next one.
Yeah.
This is his I'm still building because I'm only 24 contract.
That's crazy. That's a lot of guys, amazing to me.
A lot of guys get drafted at 23, 24. He's completed his rookie contract minus a year, but he signed this deal. And he's already getting this contract. It boggles the mind how good this kid is this young.
I agree. He's a master at his position, and he's 24 years old.
Yep.
And I think he's just going to get better. The nuances of the position and so forth. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen at the quarterback position this year to help him out. But we'll see. We'll find out. I think he's going to get plenty of opportunity, plenty of balls, maybe not stretch the field balls like he's been accustomed to all the time, but maybe that actually works out better for him in the long run, where he's asked to get open, create space, do some slants over the middle, all that kind of stuff, and gives him a chance after the catch to really kind of show a different side of his game, which is there. He just hasn't had a chance to do it.
Well, and one of the things, I mean, Russell Wilson was never good at throwing the ball over the middle. There was a chunk of the field that the team didn't use because Wilson was great throwing to the boundaries and throwing it deep and that kind of stuff, but he wasn't good over the middle. And so without Wilson and with a new quarterback, even though the quarterbacks are going to be substantially inferior to Wilson overall, there is more field to work with. And so they can use him in different ways where, run him on some drag routes or some crossing patterns and get him open with a chance to run and in more of an intermediate distance.
Yeah.
There can be a lot of yards after the catch for him this year, and the team's going to need him to do that.
I would imagine his yards after catch goes up by a couple yards per attempt. Yeah. Just because of that, really.
Well, the Seahawks have always been one of the last teams, like one of the bottom teams in yards after the catch. And when Wilson was here, because a lot of those plays were deep downfield and either they're caught in the end zone, so there's none, or they're caught for a big play, but then, pushed out of bounds. So there's like half a yard or whatever. There's very little yard after the catch in the way the offense was run before. And I think that's going to change this year.
I think it's going to change drastically.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot of getting the ball out quick, getting the ball into a receiver's hands and giving them the opportunity to get 5 or 6 yards after the catch by design on a lot of different plays.
So I'd like to get to the quarterback stuff, but I want to do it in a little bit. So let's get back to that conversation, because I think it's going to be a unique conversation to have. So I want to mention Jamal Adams. Turns out first day of practice, he breaks his finger. Nobody really knows about it. Got it caught in a jersey. Pete Carroll comes out at a press conference the next day and says, question is, where's Jamal? And he's like, well, Jamal had this little thing with his hand. He's flying to, LA to see a specialist for an opinion. And everyone's just kind of going, oh my goodness, what's the deal again? He's injured. Is he going to have surgery? How much time is he going to miss? Turns out didn't have to have surgery, came back in a cast. And 2 days later, he's in practice, causing havoc. So that was kind of a close call for the team. What are your thoughts around Jamal Adams?
Well, I mean, so he's had this thing ever since he's joined the Seahawks, and I don't know if it was true with the Jets, but I know the whole time he's been with Seattle, he's had problem with his fingers dislocating. And so they have been popping in and out on him. It's painful. Yeah. It's been a problem. He had surgery over the offseason to try and correct that. And so when he hurt his hand, it was thought, I'm like, okay, well, he had surgery on that particular hand. It might have been something to do with that, and they were worried about that. And so he went and had it looked at. No, it turned out it just broke a finger. Put a cast on it, get out there and play. Yeah. And the fact that he gets out there and plays is part of the reason why he's Jamal Adams. He's not going to let, a finger injury stop him. I mean, he's had fingers get popped out of socket. He pops them back in and runs back on the field.
Right. And we saw Rashad Penny a couple of years ago do the opposite.
Well,
where Rashad Penny hurt a hand or a finger and missed like 2 weeks of practice or something.
Yeah, it was different. He couldn't get it back in, and it took a specialist in order to reset it, and there was some extra damage. But yeah, I mean, we know that Jamal Adams is like a warrior. He's going to play through these kind of things, and that's part of the reason why his teammates love him and that kind of stuff. But it is a little worrisome that it's just a lot of injuries on one body.
Yeah. I identify with Jamal. I was that player when I was playing. I just get my fingers caught in jerseys. I hit somebody hard and it might, dislocations. I probably had 6, 7, 8 dislocations in my fingers and a couple breaks just in a couple of years, senior type seasons. And but I think he's gonna be fine. He's gonna be fine.
Oh yeah,
I'm just gonna say it out loud right now. Make it happen. All right. So one of the weirdest things, in fact, you just reminded me of this right before we pushed record, was J.R. Sweezy. I haven't heard that name for a while. Signed a 1-day contract with the Seattle Seahawks to retire as a Seahawk. What?
I mean, okay. So he went from being a defensive lineman to a Pro Bowl guard in Seattle. So there's a little bit of that. It was kind of home for a while. The team decided to move on, and he went to Arizona. He played in Arizona longer than he played in Seattle.
I have to admit, we missed him a little bit when he moved, because that was the part where Britt was kind of coming along and kind of trying to replace him, and just wasn't doing a very good job. And they ended up moving Britt to center, which worked out okay, but the Sweezy thing is kind of interesting, because I think he was good here for 3, maybe 4 years, moved on. I think he's played longer out and about than he played as a Seahawk, and good for him. I mean, he wants to come back. The team did him right, signed him, and he retires as a Seahawk. He's not going on the wall of Hall of Fame or anything like that. He just wants to retire as a Seahawk. But the interesting thing is, it came 1 or 2 days after KJ Wright did the same thing. So I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, with Sweezy, like, it's all about relationships, right? So he moved on, played in Arizona and all of that, but it sounds like he maintained relationships with people in the building, and not just players, but coaches and guys in the front office. And yes, he's playing for another team, but he was very grateful for Seattle for getting him into the league, teaching him how to play, giving him an opportunity to go earn some good money elsewhere. And he just felt like it was the right thing, was for him to go out as a Seahawk, go out with the same team that he came in on.
Yeah.
And honestly,
and you don't hear about that very often, Keith.
No.
This is not something that happens more than once, maybe a year, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a guy who was good. I mean, he was just the absolute most mauler of a run blocker. Not great in pass protection, but a mauler as a run blocker, and was good. And he was a defensive lineman. He was not a guard. He was not an offensive lineman until
this was a Tom Cable project.
Yes, and unfortunately, this set the tone for so many other failed Tom Cable projects that ultimately cost the Seahawks a second Super Bowl. It cost the Seahawks maybe a third Super Bowl. And that's not putting that on Sweezy. He did his job and did it great, but it inflated Tom Cable's ego to a point where he felt that he could put anybody out there and they would do fine. And it was a disaster. The fact that we were able to keep Russell Wilson here in Seattle as long as we did, given the disaster that was Tom Cable, is kind of surprising. But yeah, I mean,
yeah.
If Sweezy had been just a little less good, the team might have been better off in the long term.
That's funny too. I know what you mean.
Any listeners that didn't read my stuff when I was writing should know that I have this unrational hatred of everything Tom Cable. So when I'm given an opportunity to say something like super negative about him, I'm probably going to take it. It's not personal. I just really, really don't like the guy. And I think he's bad at his job. So have fun with that.
So let's change course. Let's go to somebody who's good with his job, but contracted COVID. Pete Carroll,
yeah,
has the vid, and he's at home watching practice video and isolating.
Yep.
And so we'll see. He's got to be out probably at least 5 days or something like that, and we'll see what happens. Sometimes some symptoms last longer than that. Sometimes you're still positive longer than that, and so. But the team does need him out there. And one of the reasons why I think they need him more or less is to help make decisions around this quarterback situation. So the way that it's playing out to me, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you have another interpretation, but Geno Smith's, inserted as the starter going into camp. All offseason going into camp, he's a starter. He's taking reps with the number one unit. So far, he's taken all but 5 reps with the number one offensive unit, and Drew Lock has taken second team reps and third team as well. And the way that plays out in practice is that usually the defense number ones are going against the offensive number ones, and so Geno has gotten a look against the number one defense and so forth, and that's where that competition is at. As far as Drew Lock is concerned, he's with the 2s. He's also facing the 2s and 3s. So when he's standing out, maybe there's a little caveat with that because he's not facing the best competition.
But he also doesn't have the best slot of receivers around him.
Correct. Right. And so let's talk about this for a minute, because before the show, we kind of talked about perception and different reporters that are reporting on training camp have little different ideas of what they're seeing, what it means in the context of the larger practice and where the team's going and so forth. So kind of talk to me a little bit about what you see in the competition and anything else you're really wanting to bring up.
Well, I think we should kind of have this conversation about reporter bias, because there are different takes on exactly the same drill, where one guy will come out and say, "Oh man, this was just a terrible run by the defense or by the offense. They couldn't do anything. It was really bad." And another reporter will watch the same thing and say, "Yeah, the offense made a couple plays, but the defense really owned it, and there were all of these spectacular plays by the defense." So which was it? Yes. Was it spectacular play by the defense, or was it really bad play by the offense? Or was it a little bit of both? But it's really easy when you expect this offense to be bad, which I do, and I think a bunch of the reporters do, to go in and see, like the other day when they had, they were doing a red zone drill where they were just, different drives all start in the red zone. Can they get in? And they went 0 for 10. And be like, see, the offense is terrible.
Right.
And they lose the fact that the day before,
and the quarterbacks in particular looked horrible and off and not worthy of a jersey, and
the day before they did the same set of red zone drills, and I think they had 5 touchdowns in there, and on the day when they had 0, I mean, not mentioned in some reporters' stuff, but in others, you'll see that Nuasu had this like crazy tip and athletic interception, and Kobe Bryant made a couple of like wow plays. And okay, so where do we go with this? Because it's hard to read these drastically different takes on the same set of drills,
right?
And get a great feel for exactly where the team's at.
Especially since, and I'll say this, the practices are just not shown, as fans, that you see the live streaming thing and Seahawks.com and so forth, but you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing the drills. Mm-hmm. You're not seeing the actual players go 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 or anything.
Yeah, because once they get into the team portion of the practice, they turn the feed off,
which is when they go live. And if they're on at that time, they literally show people standing on the sideline.
Yeah, they're live during like the individual drills and the position drills and that kind of stuff, or maybe like
but they're still not showing it. It's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
But at the moment they go to team workouts where it's 7-on-7, 11-on-11, the feed's off.
Yes,
it's gone.
Right.
They don't want to show any of that too.
No, it's all fine. It's all, I mean, it is what it is, and it's been like this forever. So I'm not complaining about that. But it is interesting, like you said, there is a little bias there. Some reporters, just kind of find the things that are negative and report on those, and others look for reasons why something didn't turn out correctly, and maybe there was something going on the other side that was forcing that issue or whatever. So
see, it kind of comes down to, you look at the individual person that's reporting, and the two most negative guys, Corbin Smith and Sean Michael Dugar. Corbin Smith used to be with Sports Illustrated. I'm not sure who he's with anymore other than his own podcast. And then Sean Michael Dugar is with Athletic, used to be with Tacoma News Tribune. Both are really good at what they do. They're
absolutely
very knowledgeable guys. Corbin Smith was the guy who, when we did our live show up in Seattle, told us that Witherspoon might not make the team, even though he looked like the best cornerback in practice every day. Like he was plugged in, and then like a few days later, they traded him to Pittsburgh for nothing. And that was interesting, so I mean, I will say that they're pros. I mean, Corbin's one of the hardest working guys in the business in Seattle for sure. But you're right, when it comes to seeing things, I think you're looking at it. Let's just take the quarterbacks for example. It's just hyper focused on the quarterbacks without the context of who are they throwing to. What were the coaches looking for in this particular drill? What was the defense doing on the other side to make it hard for them? It'd just be kind of nice to have a little bit of that context. I know it's difficult, and I know that it's a hard job to convey that. But I'd be interested and curious as to, and then you look at guys like Greg Bell or Bob Condata, who had just a little bit more of an even-handed take on it. Now, I don't know if that's because those guys are just trying to, give both sides a little bit of credit, or if they actually saw it in a different way. It'd be very interesting to get everyone in the same room and kind of hash it out a little bit, because as fans, we're and our own show, we're dependent upon some of those reports to give us an idea of where we're at. And based on everything that we're hearing, where we're at is our quarterbacks are completely worthless, and we're going to have a
horrible year just based on that factor alone. I mean, that's really what I'm hearing out of a couple of camps. And on the other side, I'm hearing that the defense is outstanding. Kobe Bryant's having a tremendous camp. Nuwasu, all the guys are working really hard and making it really hard on the offense, and they're just really ahead. And this defense actually might be better than we're giving them credit for. So, I mean, there's both of those things, and they can both be right. I just don't know for sure.
Yeah, I brought up the part about, mentioning the guys because I don't want, this isn't a situation like there's a couple of blogs out there that are hyper negative all the time about everything to do with Pete Carroll or John Snyder or anything that they've ever put their hands on. And so therefore they're going to hate everything. And these aren't guys that do that. They're professionals. They're awesome. But they're hyper negative, and it makes me really worry. But again, how much confirmation bias are we running into? It's really hard to tell. Now, Tyler Lockett went on the radio and was asked about it and did the thing that you would expect from a player, especially one that's a veteran that knows how the game works, and just talked up both guys to, all over the place. Was talking about how, Drew Lock's arm and his ability to throw with all these different arm angles and get the ball out to the sidelines, super quickly because of how hard he throws. And Geno Smith's mastery of all the little nuances. And he just talked the guys up like they were both going to be Pro Bowlers, which I thought was kind of funny. But I mean, that's what you expect from a player, right? Mm-hmm. What we know right now is that we don't know anything. And we won't know anything, I think, until the mock game that comes up in a few days.
I have to give Corbin some credit because, when he does see something that's good, he says it. He compliments players. He highlights, plays and so forth. So I can't really say that he's completely hyper negative and with a straight face. I would say that he's accentuating some of the negative stuff, but maybe that was the story of the day. The story of the day was the quarterbacks underperformed and didn't take the reins, if you will, and catapult at least one of them into maybe a clear front runner on this competition. Yeah, you could look at it that way and read, some of the stuff that's coming out from Corbin in that way as well. So,
one of the things that I will say, though, they've had 4 practices, and in 2 of them, the offense couldn't find the end zone.
Yeah. No, it's a big concern.
At all.
Yeah.
And one of them, they were starting in the red zone on every drive.
Right.
So we have reason to be very concerned about the state of the offense right now.
And we're not counting the running plays here. This is just passing.
Yeah, because it's really hard to do anything with running plays because they have not. Because
they're going to let them go through. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the pads don't start until right now.
So what we know, and I'm hearing a little bit, especially from Greg Bell. I think I heard a little bit of this. Is that now might be the time to see what Drew Lock can do with the number 1 offense. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to hear that just a little bit. It's like Geno had a really rough day. If this is really a competition, maybe it's give Drew Lock a chance with the number 1s and see what he can do. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens in the next 2 or 3 days. I know Pete Carroll's not there. I mentioned that with the COVID thing. Tater Smith is running some of the stuff that Pete Carroll has run, but Pete's involved. He has conversations multiple times a day, I'm sure, as well as watching all the film. So they'll make this decision with or without Pete Carroll actually on the field. And I think that by within the next couple of weeks, Drew Lock's going to get a chance. We'll see what happens. Seahawks activated 5th round pick Tariq Smith from the PUP list. The other 3 guys that were on it previously, including our cornerback from last year, is still on there.
Trey Brown.
Yeah. And then let me see. You mentioned Nuwasu having the interception. I'm hearing a lot of good things about the defense, just overall, just individual players coming up and making plays. It's hard, as you said, because the position guys, the guys that are able to affect the ball So now Nwasu, he's a linebacker, but nonetheless, he made an interception. You hear about Kobe Bryant a lot. You're hearing about Tyreek Woolen hanging with Marquise, a good one in practice, the wide receiver, matching him, step for step and all that kind of stuff. So you're hearing a lot about these skilled position player type guys on both offense and defense, but really not a lot about the guys in the trenches. And I know that Clint Hurt came out in the press conference the other day and talked about Shelby Harris and Brian Monet and Poona Ford, those guys in the middle, Quentin Jefferson, Al Woods, being the key to this new defense, this new look, and the guys creating the pressure, the Nwasu, the Taylors, the Alton Robinsons, the Boya Maffes. He talked about the importance of all of those guys to this entire thing, and he says, we just weren't very good last year. In fact, they were 11th in the league in points allowed, but they were 28th in the league in yards allowed. They also ranked 31st in passing yards allowed and 17 in rushing yards allowed. And he expected all of those numbers to improve this year.
Well, I hope so, because the defense was genuinely bad last year. And they just could not get off the field. The number of 19 play drives that they gave up.
That's almost not an exaggeration.
No, it isn't an exaggeration, because the number is 3. They had 3 19 play drives last year against them. Yeah.
Did they really?
They did.
I thought you were kidding. I could see 15, but 19.
There were 3 19. They could not get off the field. And so to say, oh, well, yeah, we expect everything to be better. Well, it's kind of hard to be worse. But the truth of it matter is, when you look at this team and what's going on in practice, the defense is the strength of this team. And that's not just because the quarterbacks and the offense are struggling.
Right.
The team is built for the defense to be the strength of the team. The cornerbacks, especially, which was this huge question mark.
Oh man, no question. Yeah.
And like the biggest question mark has actually been one of the brightest spots of training camp so far, because the 4 guys, right? Artie Burns, Sidney Jones, and then the 2 rookies, Bryant and Woolen, have all looked good. Like,
yeah,
Kobe Bryant wants to start.
Yes.
He is pushing hard. But Pete Carroll came out and said it's going to be nearly impossible to unseat Sidney Jones, because 1, he was a starter before, and 2, he's playing that well in camp as well. So that means it comes down to the Artie Burns versus Kobe Bryant fight for the other side. And that's good to see, because Artie Burns has played well. Artie Burns, in the last day of practice, which was the first day with Metcalf, he was the guy who took on, would take cuts in line on the drills, the one-on-ones, to go up against Metcalf over and over again, because he wanted that challenge. He wanted to go up against the best.
Got pissed off.
Yeah.
and then took on Darrell Taylor in a little scuffle. So the defense is definitely frustrating the offense.
It is.
And this time of the year, you're going to get dust ups like that. I don't mind it, actually.
I love
but it's nice to see, like you talked about the defensive back, specifically Kobe Bryant. I mean, this has to be one of the biggest stories in training camp so far. The emergence of this young rookie, challenging for a starting spot, is the best case scenario that could come out of the draft and early training camp for the Seahawks, because this was going to be the question mark, but this was also going to be one of the largest competitions in camp as well. We talked about the offensive line, maybe that 3rd to 5th wide receiver spot, but on the other side of the ball, it was the defensive backs that were going to have a massive tryout to find out who was going to start and be heavily involved in the rotation. And it sounds like he's right there.
Yeah. Those 3 guys are there, and Tariq Woolen's played really well. You mentioned Marquise Goodwin, the wide receiver, track star. It popped into my head when you were talking. I'm like, wait, did I remember him that he was an Olympic long jumper?
Yes.
Or maybe it was
he was in the Olympics. Yeah.
So he was a long jumper. He was with the track team. I didn't say that's the thing. Did he go to the Olympics, or do I just remember that? That's not true. But if you say that it's true, I'm going to run with it.
Keith, I think so. But it's been years since I've had little bit of information.
He's 31. He hasn't had a great year since 2017, but the dude has wheels, and he's got a lot of
skill. He's got a lot
of skill, a lot of experience.
Yes.
And he played with the current wide receivers coach who came over from Buffalo. That's where he was last year. So there's, some knowledge about what's expected of him as far as within the offense and from his coaches. And Tariq Woolen has matched up with them and is that guy that can just step for step.
Yes.
Against the world-class speed.
And even when he falls behind by a step or half a step, he makes it up.
Yep. And he's got that length that it doesn't really matter. So I just find that to be fascinating. That group was a huge question mark. And it really feels like this.
And Trey Brown's still out.
Yeah. And Trey Brown looked really good.
And just to add to the pile of talent there when he comes back. Interesting.
I just want to take this opportunity to point out just how wrong I was about Trey Brown when he was drafted, because I did not like that draft pick, and he made me eat those words constantly last season until his injury. And I love it. Like that was great, and I can't wait for him to get back. It's a rough injury to return from, so I'm not expecting him to be back right away. But
with the group in front of him now, he doesn't need to.
Yeah, he's gonna get a chance to come back, play when he's ready, not be rushed, and go back to being great. And suddenly, this is a really nice, deep position group.
So one of the kids that I feel really kind of bad for is D. Eskridge right now. He had an opportunity to be able to come into camp healthy and compete for the number 3 starting, essentially starting wide receiver spot in this offense, and just can't get healthy. Still having a hard time getting on the practice field for what's being called a minor hamstring issue. But how minor can it be if you're going to miss the first full week of practice and then plus? So I don't know. It's a rough deal.
That I understand they wanted a weapon, and he's kind of that weapon more than a receiver because he can do a bunch of different things. But man, that draft pick in the second round instead of Creed Humphrey, the center, when they desperately needed the center, it just continues to look worse and worse. And it's hard because it's like it's injury and the team can't predict that and everything. I really want,
and he could definitely come back.
Well.
Yeah, he could come back and
do well. But last year was a lost year. Now can't even get on the practice field for training camp. That's too bad.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about before we head out of here is the right tackle competition. So Charles Cross has got that left side. He's started with the ones since the first play, and he hasn't let that thing go. But on the right side, it's a little interesting to me because Stone Forsythe has kind of come in and has been a third name that we kind of we mentioned a few times in the offseason, but we really didn't know that it was going to be he was going to actually have an opportunity to compete. So far it's been Jake Curran and Stone Forsythe alternating days with the ones. And it's been Abel Lucas who's remained with the twos so far. But it's still early, but I'm almost encouraged by this in the fact that Jake Curran and Stone Forsythe are battling really neck and neck here, because we just didn't see any of Stone Forsythe last year. We heard that he was a decent tackle, maybe fell in the draft for a few different reasons. And now after a year of seasoning and strength building in the off season, he's come in and shown to be ready to compete for a spot, which is great.
I mean, those are two drastically different players, because Jake Curran is just a road grader who moves people. 300-pounders have a hard time resisting his push, but his feet are slow and he's not a great pass blocker. Forsythe is the opposite. He's got nice, quick feet. It's really hard to get around on the corner, changes direction well.
He's 6'9",
but doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't.
330 pounds or whatever.
He can't, because he's 6'9". He has a really hard time getting his pads underneath that of the defender. He loses leverage, and therefore doesn't get push in the running game. Yeah. And so you end up with two drastically different guys. It's great to see Stone Forsythe in there because that means that his development has been solid, and we have a great backup at left tackle. You know what I mean? To have
and right tackle if needed. Yeah.
I still don't think that this is a true competition where he's involved. I think this is about developing him into a swing tackle that can play both positions. Because if it was a true competition, then you'd see like Abe Lucas moved over to the left side. So that way those two guys could all, one of them with the ones, one of them with the twos, and switch back and forth. But you haven't. You've seen Abe Lucas with the twos the entire time, and Stone Forsythe is moving back and forth between the left side and the right side when he switches.
I've also heard this rumor. I can't remember who came out. I don't know if it was Corbin Smith or somebody else, with the idea that the team might be looking at an opportunity possibly to move Jake Curran inside. And that's Stone Forsythe would then get those reps outside and be ready to go if they decided to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Curran is a little tall to be guard, but man, he other than that, he could be a good guard. I mean, he's athletically, he's kind of a better fit at guard than at tackle, but he's so good on the outside as a run blocker that, you kind of want to leave him there too. But
then we have the inside taken care of right now.
Yeah, we have both the starters on the inside, but imagine if you have a situation where maybe you move Lewis to center and let Curran go inside and play guard, and have Forsythe / Lucas as your right tackle. I mean, trying to get your best five on the field.
Yes, you're right.
At this time.
Yeah, and you're right, and you kind of paint it in the direction of the diversity. Which is kind of the larger conversation here. We haven't had a very diverse offensive line for quite a while. And the diversity now that we have with the talent could be in the makings of being one of the best offensive line we've had since Pete Carroll came.
Yeah.
Really.
Over the last 3 off seasons, they've added, they've drafted 4 players that are starting caliber. They've traded for Gabe Jackson, and they ended up getting Jake Curran as an undrafted free agent. I mean, they've done a good job of acquiring talent on the offensive line and coaching them up, which is something they haven't done for most of Pete Carroll's tenure here. The offensive line was kind of this one area that was always kind of neglected and didn't do well. And I know so much of that was Tom Cable. But yeah, I mean, I like this group. I really like this group. It's really young. I'm concerned a little bit about how young they are at tackle and that kind of stuff. There's just very few veterans in the room.
It seems like we're not going to make the playoffs this year or go to the Super Bowl, Keith. So this might be the time to develop. Well, it's all about development. It's more of,
what are you seeing in the film room? What are those kind of things doing? Having the veteran presence, having that knowledge base is useful, because the only veterans on the offensive line are Blythe and Jackson.
Yeah. And Lewis has, had 2 full years of playing experience. Yeah. Interesting. Fun. Interesting. This should be a really good week. The pads start to come out today in practice. Today is Tuesday. And then I think the mock game here is coming up in a few days. So that'll be nice to hear some reports about that. And then the first preseason game is 13th against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we'll find out where we're at. So
13th, less than 2 weeks away from the first.
Less than 2 weeks.
The first time that they're out there playing.
Yeah. And it'll be long overdue for me. It's time that we start seeing some stuff on the field.
Yep. And it'll be two teams that have no idea what's going on at quarterback. Because Pittsburgh's in a very similar situation as Seattle. And now they've got younger players that are perceived to have more talent overall, but yeah, it's they don't know what's going on at quarterback either. So we'll see what happens.
I'm not even worried about those guys. Really, I'm just interested in finding out where we fire
that's what the preseason's for. Yeah, but I'm just throwing out there a little intrigue. 4 quarterbacks, none of them really starter worthy, all playing on 2 teams.
They're rated, and so it's going to be a splash for them. Anything else?
No, I think we're good.
Let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter. I'm Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. Find the show, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.